I'll answer your questions in reverse order. How do I know whether my work is going to is good for the best journals, or where should it place? So my advisor was David Zilberman. Okay, this guy who's published in very, very good journals, and every project we ever started together, and we published a lot, right? At the beginning of my career, every project we started, he's like, yeah, I think this can hit the AER. We never hit the AER. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, I guess, if you have the time in your career to allow yourself to be rejected, send it to the best journal you can imagine it being a fit for, and let it get rejected. If you're not getting rejected, you're shooting too low. Okay. You are uniformly shooting too low if you are always getting your papers accepted. Send it higher. Okay. So that's the way I'd start this. But then thinking about good versus bad journals, I prefer to refer to them as good versus evil. But so there are different ways to think about what is a good versus a bad journal. If you're concerned, if you get a job as an academic and you're concerned about tenure, you want to talk to the people in your department and figure out what they think are good journals. And many departments, not all, but many departments actually have a list. Here are the journals that we care about. You publish in these and you're fine. You publish outside of these and we don't care. Okay. In that case, those are the good journals. And the others are not. But you might also be concerned about your reputation outside of that school. Maybe you get hired at a place that, okay, so it's fun, but I'd like to envision myself somewhere else later on in my career. And then you want to publish in journals that are going to be cared about by the types of departments you care about. And that's going to be different for different types of goals. For some people, that's going to be, hey, well, I've got to try and find a way to publish in the top 5 econ journals. And for others, it might be, I've got to make sure I hit the AJE a whole bunch of times, or food policy. And for others, it might be, I'm good if I can hit agribusiness a few times, right? It really just depends on where you want to go and what sort of lifestyle you want to live, because the department you work in will have a lot to say about that type of lifestyle, and what sort of pressure cooker you will be in, or other sort of environment. And the last thing I'd mention is there's also reputation outside of economics, and at that point you might want to consider very seriously impact factor, because that's going to tell you about how much you're going to get cited when you get published in a particular journal. And the first thing you'll notice when you look at impact factor is economics is terrible, right? Interdisciplinary journals get cited a whole bunch more, but they don't necessarily build your reputation in economics. If you're thinking about being in public policy or a school of public health or something like that, these impact factors are going to matter a whole bunch, and the citations are going to matter a whole bunch. But the econ journals really do matter if you're going to be an economist, right?
I think you just covered it.
One thing I'll add is, you asked sort of where should you think about submitting your paper? A good way to answer that is, where are the journals you're citing? So that's always a good signal. If you're aspiring to submit this to some journal and you're not citing any papers there, that seems something incongruent there. So that's a good signal to you, is what are the kinds of papers I'm citing? What journals are there in? That's sort of like a signal of sort of the ballpark of places you should be thinking about. But otherwise, I don't have a lot to add over that, other than just really, I've been a member of a number of different departments, and those are really department specific norms in a lot of cases. Particularly, if you are in a college of agriculture where you're going to get your promotion case evaluated at a college committee, David's point is exactly right. They look at the impact factors of econ journals and they're like, and so if you're in one of those colleges, it kind of helps sometimes to have well, everybody like to have a science or nature kind of paper, but even not those, but some with, even, higher impact factors. I tend to always take like a portfolio approach to these sorts of things. One last thing I'll add is I've had kind of a bias over time that's emerged, which is there's probably a subset of journals within ag economics that I know most of my peers are going to read. They're going to read the AJE. They're probably going to get the AEPP, probably see what's in food policy. And if I publish outside of those, like the people who pay attention to my work aren't always going to see that. So even though it might be a quote unquote better journal, I tend to find those papers don't get cited as much because the people that sort of read and cite what I do are not reading those journals all the time. So often I kind of find there is value because I have a disciplinary reputation to publish within that discipline, because it sort of feeds upon itself in a way that even if I could sometimes publish a paper over here, I can see what happens when I do that and they kind of get ignored. So anyway, there's like a lot of dynamics sort of thinking about that there. Maybe one last point I'll make is, everybody on this panel has written lots of papers, published lots of papers. I think there's a tendency from your shoes to look at us and say like, well, you must never get papers rejected. That is not true. It just means we've had a lot of papers rejected. And David's exactly right. You should always aim high because your reputation is built around those things, and getting rejection is just part of the job. You got to live with it.
On the notion of having papers rejected, when I was a PhD student at a workshop like this, the advice that was given was know your amount of target publications that you want, and then know how much you get rejected. And if you need one, but you get a lot rejected, then you need to have 10 out. That is how I started building my record, because you might get more rejected in the beginning, probably not. I still have a lot of papers rejected, but it really depends on how many do you have out, to hit that target number. If you need 3 and you are only sending out 3, that might not be enough because it takes a long time for them to get published.